Now, nearly a year on since this particular chapter all began, there has been a dramatic escalation, particularly, of course, with regards to Lebanon. We've seen, of course, and we've already done a video discussing this, the assassination of the Secretary General of Hezbollah, Nasrallah, who was assassinated last week, but crucially with huge numbers, uncountless. We don't know how many Lebanese civilians have been killed. And of course, as ever, that particular death toll has become not even secondary, barely mentioned in all too much of the analysis of what's happening. But we do need to be analytical. What's happening? What's the state of play? You know, what's happening on the ground? What happens next? And we've got a brilliant guest as ever, Ori Goldberg, who's a brilliant Israeli analyst. We've interviewed, I was using the royal we here. All of us have been very lucky to have had the wisdom and insight of Ori before. And you've always been, the audience here, very appreciative, rightly so, of everything Ori has had to say. So Ori, thank you so much for joining us again.
Oh, it's my pleasure, as it always is.
Let's start, actually. I mean, do you think it's fair to say, I mean, you're in Tel Aviv at the moment, obviously, where you live, that the Israeli state has moved into a triumphalist phase, more so maybe than at any point? I mean, at the beginning of this, Netanyahu, the prime minister, was actually in a lot of political difficulty, blamed for basically having left southern Israeli communities exposed. And there was big question marks about his long-term survival. You know, he was dragging the war out, many thought, in order to survive politically. His stock, I would say, is pretty high domestically now. I mean, is there basically a mood of triumphalism with regards to in terms of what's happened in Lebanon as well as Gaza?
To some extent, yes, but I wouldn't say that is the only mood in the Israeli street, and I would also say that this isn't unadulterated triumphalism. Look, Israel has certainly given the world a display of force, but also this use of force by Israel is also proof of Israel's limitations. The only thing Israel has, and it's quite a thing, don't mistake this, is this use of force. Israel has no strategy, no endgame. The political problem that it is apparently trying to, quote unquote, resolve, that is restoring security for the displaced Israelis from the north, is not actually going to get solved. Israel is not going to achieve any kind of stability in Lebanon, certainly not if it mounts a ground invasion, even a small-scale one. These targeted assassinations, sorry, I'm using the word targeted because it's such a reflex as an Israeli. These assassinations, they are a display of tactical prowess, but they're also a display of strategic weakness, because Israel is getting closure. Okay, we're getting Nasrallah. Nasrallah has been a thorn in our side for more than 30 years, and the cheek of the man doing what he's done for the last year, and he's an Iranian proxy and so on. All of these things that he's done, we're going to get him. We have assassinated a large number of senior Hezbollah personnel over the last several days. And we're getting them because they these are the official justifications. They've either mounted attacks against Israel, or they are responsible for some area of Hezbollah activity that could potentially be detrimental to Israel. But this is like connecting the dots. That's all it is. We have no idea, and we don't actually really care what happens afterwards. We don't even care what happens in Lebanon afterwards, and we certainly don't care what happens to Lebanese. These are all hallmarks of our, I'm calling it that, our Gaza doctrine, which is relatively new for Israel. Israel is very lethal when it wants to. It uses force on civilian populations. It has in the past, but this year has been like no other in those terms. Israel has completely lifted all precautions, all restrictions intended to safeguard the lives of civilians as much as possible. Right now, Israel is defining military targets, that is, people who are death-worthy, as we call them here, and anybody who gets in the way is fair game. Israel is not only killing off these strategic foes and allowing any number of what we call collateral damage, but we're also claiming that any deaths resulting from our attacks are the other side's responsibility. And that's it. That is a mindset that I cannot over exaggerate the general nuttiness, the craziness of this mindset, the detachment from the world of this mindset. Okay? I mean, we're basically denying the laws of physics. We're dropping 80 one-ton bombs on a residential block in Beirut. There's a bunker underneath it. That's true. Hundreds and hundreds are killed. None of them are our responsibility. You know, this isn't even a question of morals. This precedes morality. And this is physics. And what we're saying is we're not concerned with that. That's not. So why am I going into these details? To suggest that while Israel seems like a mad bull in a china shop, it is also weak. It's weak because it has no direction. It doesn't know where it's going. It is in rampage. Any attempt to discern a plan here that is kill all the Palestinians or kill all the Lebanese or take over the Middle East, I think is misguided because there is no plan. And just a final sentence, another way of saying how weak we are is that we're effectively retaliating. That's all we're doing. There's no initiative here. Netanyahu talks about a new order. There's no new order here. And even if Israel invades Lebanon and takes, I don't know, builds a zone that's a kilometer long or 2 kilometers long, that won't restore security. The only thing that will restore security is negotiations with Lebanon. But Israel refuses. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I'm ranting.
Well, no, you're not rambling at all. No, you never ramble. I mean, before I ask you about the question of Israel's plan, because I think what you're saying here is Israel's all tactics but no strategy. But before I ask you about that, in terms of what you're just talking about, that mentality domestically, because in 1982, when Israel invaded Lebanon, and for example, you got a terrible atrocity committed by the allies of the IDF in Sabra and Shatiya, when vast numbers of Palestinian Lebanese civilians were killed, actually in some of the most grotesque ways possible, really just disgusting crimes. And Ariel Sharon, the then defense minister, was actually found culpable by an Israeli commission. But the point I'm making there is he was forced to resign. You got mass protests by Israelis on the streets. You had a big peace movement. And it's that question of Arab life and how much basically it has been devalued, how cheap it has become, in that there was a significant chunk of Israeli society before who did actually protest about the mass slaughter of Arab civilians in Lebanon and in the occupied territories. But that seems very marginal now, and the numbers of Arabs being killed is actually much bigger. Civilians, I mean.
Oh, I'll see you and raise you, Owen. I don't know how far back it was, but it was 12 years ago or 14 years ago, I forget. It wasn't 40. Israel wanted to kill a senior Hamas commander named Saleh Abu Shhaba. And the way we killed him was to shoot a rocket through his apartment window. And it turned out that his wife and children were with him in the apartment. There was an official commission of inquiry. I'm not talking about people protesting. I'm talking about the military investigating itself. There was discussion in the press. There were public hearings. There was a sense of what's happened to us. We're turning into them. All of that is gone. Okay? Israel is no longer there. After a year in Gaza, we have lost all sense of proportion. Any direct challenge to us is a threat of obliteration. Any attempt to resist our displays of force is another indication of how, left to their own devices, all Arabs want to ultimately destroy us. And we need to do something about it, which is what Israel is doing now. And returning to your original question about whether there's triumphalism, not so much, because we are very careful about articulating the necessity of what we're doing. We're not joyful about it. Well, true, there was some celebration when Nasrallah died, but it's not like there's joy at the death of Lebanese citizens. We're sorry we have to kill them, but we have to do it. We have to attack Hodeidah in Yemen and prevent supplies from entering through one of the only ports that allows hundreds of thousands of Yemenis to live. We have to. Okay? We're not achieving any kind of victory. This is self-defense. right? So triumphalism, but adulterated.
In terms of this question about tactics and no strategy, let me be devil's advocate here, and let me just emphasize for the audience, this is being devil's advocate for and really emphasizing the devil element of that, which is, if you're the Israeli state, you might go, well, look, if you don't care about Arab life, which clearly the Israeli state does not, you go, well, what's the problem here? Actually, what we've done is obliterated Gaza. So we've abandoned containment, and now it's just, apocalyptic ruins, but we're not going to get any, there'll be continued guerrilla attacks by Hamas there, but it will be contained within Gaza. And in Lebanon, we decapitated Hezbollah, which was, not just its leader, but actually a lot of its senior cadre. Iran's power has been curtailed. A lot of them might go, well, actually, it is working. There is a strategy there. And as long as you don't care about the lives of Arabs, it is actually being very successful. What would you say to that?
I'll, again, see you and raise you. Let me be a devil's advocate. Or actually not. Let me just speak as an Israeli and say that the situation here is worsening. It's not improving. All of this isn't getting Israel anywhere. The displaced citizens from the north, they're not going to trust a limited ground maneuver. The only thing they might trust is an Israeli occupation of Lebanon, which is completely unfeasible. But look at Gaza. We set ourselves 2 goals for the quote-unquote war in Gaza. We were going to return the hostages and eliminate Hamas. We've done neither. Okay, so yes, we don't care. Yes, we demolish. Yes, we destroy. Yes, we do whatever the hell we want. It isn't getting us anywhere. It isn't improving our situation. It's making it much, much worse. And I'm not even talking about, that's a topic for another conversation, about how it accelerates the backsliding of Israeli democracy, limited as it was. The state is crumbling here. Prices are rising at a crazy pace. Everything from apartments to food in supermarkets. Jobs are disappearing. Investment is disappearing. Dude, we can't fly out of this country. Okay, there's been announcements in the press over the last few days. We're entering our high holidays this week. That's a period of 3 weeks. There are no flights out of Israel. Okay, there are thousands of Israelis stranded in the airport at Athens as we speak because airlines are not flying here. This country is besieged. And it is physically contracting. It's growing smaller and less successful. So that's awesome that we're able to do all of that and kill all the bad guys and demonstrate our general disregard for Arab lives. But it's making our situation worse. So what's the point? That's what I would say.
Do you think a invasion of Lebanon is now inevitable? And it is worth bearing in mind that strategically, when Israel has done that in the past, it's always ended in a strategic victory for those it was ranged against. What do you think?
I don't think it's inevitable. I think there's a lot of pressure from IDF leadership to do that. And I think the pressure is, again, an indication of the limitations of Israel's mindset. Because the IDF wants 2 things here. The first, it wants to make good on operational plans that have been in the works since 2006. The IDF has been planning these assassinations since 2006. It's been planning a ground invasion style retribution since 2006. And now it finally has a chance to make good on these plans, so it wants to do that. And the second thing, of course, is redemption with regard to Gaza. The IDF needs a win. The IDF needs a clearly structured plan that will be clearly implemented. And that's why they want an operation, not because they care for security, not because they think it's the ultimate solution. They're also well aware of how overextended they are and of how, in many ways, unwilling soldiers who have fought for the last year in Gaza are to report to Lebanon now and begin a ground invasion. But the leadership wants war because that is the word that will vindicate it. That is the word that will prove to all Israelis that the IDF is actually a capable fighting force. And, as far as military organizations go, and militaries are pretty dumb organizations, if you've got a plan and you can execute it, to the letter, that's good. That's a moral triumph. And they've got a plan, and they see a chance to execute it to the letter. And of course, add to that exactly what you said before, they've stopped caring. Right? They don't care about context. They don't care about implications. They don't care about civilian lives. All they want to do is execute the plan. They're not homicidal maniacs. They are monomaniacs. They're savants. They want to do what they're supposed to be able to do, and nobody should disturb them. And actually, they've been at it since October. Since October, the IDF, and I know this personally, because back then I was still invited to seminars, being an expert. The IDF has not considered any solution but a war with Lebanon. There have been discussions on the scope of the war, how long it would be, what it might achieve, and so on. It has never considered any solution but a war.
What about Iran? Because Benjamin Netanyahu was done a speech a broadcast in which he basically suggests that the Iranian regime may well end up toppling sooner than people think, and so on. I mean, many people alluding to a very substantial attack. I mean, to be frank, we did see, of course, the assassination in Tehran of Hamas's leader, which suggested a degree of infiltration in the Iranian state. And there's a suggestion that the Iranian state doesn't even know how much it's been infiltrated. I mean, that was the case with Hezbollah as well. What do you think? I mean, do you think, again, is this just kind of Netanyahu, is it rhetorical? Or is it actually, do you think there's something substantive there and Israel is trying to goad Iran into a confrontation and it thinks it has a strong set of cards at the moment?
First, I think Israel has been trying to goad Iran for a while now. Okay, not necessarily because it wants a regional war, but because that's what happens when you get addicted to what Israel calls escalating to de-escalate. There's no other option. And if you want to go back to the notion of being concerned exclusively with ourselves, of solipsism, that's part of it too. What other option do you have? De-escalation requires negotiations. It requires a conversation. We don't want to have a conversation with the Iranians. That's one thing. Netanyahu's rhetoric is not very different from rhetoric he has used before, including when speaking at the United Nations General Assembly. This is his thing, presenting Israel as the opposite of Iran. And this whole speaking directly to the Iranian people, he does that every once in a while, and it's usually ridiculous. By the way, breeding hilarious memes in Persian on Iranian social networks. Nobody takes him seriously in that sense. He used to be very suave and very charismatic in his delivery of these ominous messages, but now I think the entire world can see that he reeks of effort. Everything he says is belabored. So the notion that Israel has it within its limited capacity, within its injured, exhausted capacity, to simply move on to the next stage and attack Iran, which is a big deal, I doubt that's true. Just like I doubt Hezbollah has it within its capacity to attack Tel Aviv, which would really be a casus belli, a reason to go to war. I don't think that's there to move to the next phase. And also, again, I think Israel is talking too much. When Israel wants to do things, it doesn't talk. Okay, and Israel is constantly, we're about to invade, we're about to invade, we're about to invade. Yeah, I don't know, maybe, but not a real invasion. And that's the final thing. Israel is afraid. Meeting Hezbollah fighters on their home terrain has never worked out for the IDF. Certainly not in the situation that it finds itself in now. So I doubt we're going to see a ground war. I sincerely doubt we're going to see Iran get involved. Remember what you said about Israel being a blessing and Iran being the curse. That's an inequality that Netanyahu has worked hard to impose on the global consciousness. Israel is the opposite of Iran. The problem is that inequality seems to be flipping now. The worse Israel looks, the more aggressive and disregarding and just generally not careless, but impervious Israel looks, the better Iran looks. Iran looks like the grown-up in the room, like somebody who's willing to consider strategic issues, who listens and does, what they're told when they're told, who is able to compromise. So Iran has a great deal to gain from not joining this and turning it into a regional war?
I mean, in terms of what the Israeli state strategy has been, though, I mean, what's also been a success is they've, the US clearly has not. I mean, the US state has basically decided that a lot of what Israel has done is not in its interests, but it just hand wrings about it, and it doesn't. I mean, that's, by the way, not to let them off the hook. If anything, it makes it worse, because the point is, what the Israeli state knows that it will get that hand wringing and that irritation, but the US state will just keep handing them arms. They'll keep giving them the diplomatic support maybe that they need. So basically, Israel's calculation has been, we're pissing off the hegemon that we completely rely on, but it doesn't matter, because actually it doesn't matter how much we piss them off and how much we escalate things, they're going to continue to back us no matter what. And that is the ultimate insurance, because if you've got the hegemon, the only hegemon on your side, you can more or less get away with anything you like, which is what Israel has tested to destruction.
Well, we certainly like to think so, and you're right that reality so far seems to substantiate that argument. I would say two things about that. First, notice your use of "we don't care," because what's going to happen ultimately is what we want to happen. See how that fits in well with the general sense of "we don't care." We don't care about Arab lives. We don't care about context. We don't care, because we know it's going to happen. I don't think the U.S. is going to flip. I do think, however, that Israel has overdone it. I think Netanyahu has overplayed his hand. I think he's being particularly stupid about the way he has behaved. During his visit to the United States, he has also been very particular about broadcasting his support for Trump. And I don't think that's being taken lightly in Washington. The more Israel drives this to the brink, the easier it should be for the United States to step in. Not as a peacemaker or not even as an honest broker, but simply as the preventer of catastrophe. I think this will all be, this is all coming to some showdown that will take place over the next few days. Remember the Jewish high holidays, which are also important. I think we're in for a very intense 2 weeks. I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of these 2 weeks, Israel had invaded a kilometer or two, occupied a kilometer or two of Lebanese territory. I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of these 2 weeks there'd be a ceasefire that included a deal in Gaza. Right now, it's about political will, and it's about Netanyahu examining his options. I don't know that it's necessarily easy to snap out of this murderous solipsism, but I think Netanyahu is a very wily operator. I think he identifies opportunities both for himself personally and for Israel. And again, something about the way Israel is preparing for this ground invasion seems off to me. Netanyahu has reaped all of his political points from the bombing campaign. He stands to gain nothing from the ground invasion. So I think we're still in for some dramatic twists.
On that, I mean, just what you alluded to there was this famous, I think it was a US general during the Vietnam War, who said the US should declare victory and go home. And I wonder if you think that is something which, the kind of just you declare victory somehow, and then, you beat.
Sure.
What do you think?
That's definitely there. I mean, it's definitely part of what Israel is trying to do. It's certainly what Israel was trying to do in Gaza over the last few months. So when it, for example, assassinated Mohammed Deif and killed more than 100 or 150 Palestinian civilians in one of the worst, events I've ever seen, described again as a precision attack by the Israeli Air Force. Israel is trying to, again, assassinate senior targets. In fact, this Israeli modus operandi is so familiar now that in Lebanon it has been greatly accelerated. In Hamas, every week, every 2 weeks, Israel would make an announcement that it had assassinated the commander in charge of whatever. And Israel has already gotten to the point in Lebanon where it is assassinating the person in charge of Hezbollah's rocket unit on the southern frontier, or the commander of other Palestinian terrorist organizations. So I think what Israel is trying to do is compile a list that is impressive enough so it can have its mission accomplished moment. That's another reason why I think a significant ground invasion is not in the works, because it seems like Israel is going whole hog, sorry, on this campaign that will ultimately allow it to declare victory and go home.
Just finally, what do you think do you think there's a holding pattern for the US elections? And what do you think will happen in either scenario? I mean, some would say, could there just be a massive escalation? I mean, some would say, well, they've managed to escalate without Donald Trump. But what do you think?
I think a massive escalation would be frowned upon by both a Trump administration and a Harris administration. I don't think Donald Trump wants a ground war that commits American forces. If he's made a coherent promise to his base, it's that America is not going to get involved in crapshoots like that all over the globe, including in Israel, and he's not a big fan of Netanyahu anymore. So I don't think any American administration is looking forward to a war. The election is not that far off now.
Mm-hmm.
But I would assume carefully that this situation will be resolved before the American election, one way or another. Either there'll be a war and the election will take place in the shadow of the war, or there will be some kind of temporary ceasefire that will include Gaza. Look, it's also volatile and also contentious and also laden with all kinds of potential. It's all up in the air. Mm-hmm. Anything can happen. That's partially a result of Israel's behavior, because Israel has made it clear that no rules apply. That can also be used to make a right or left turn and find oneself doing things profoundly differently. I think that's likely because I'm not discerning any kind. That's how we began. I'm not discerning any kind of committed strategic motivation on Israel's part. I think Israel's game for everything. As long as it can sell this to the displaced Israelis from the north, Israel's game for anything, because anything may prove politically useful to Netanyahu. And I really do think anything can happen. I do think that there's a lesson to be learned here, a lesson for the world, and that is that the ultimate result of the kind of pampered entitlement with which Israel has been supported by its Western allies is not an adoption of straight out fascism, or a clear political agenda. It is this murderous solipsistic rampage where no rules apply, where nothing holds. And I think that is a lesson the world needs to take to heart very quickly and very effectively. We are now at a stage where, because we so profoundly don't care, we can do anything. And I'm in mind of the famous conversation between Alice and the Cheshire Cat when she sees him as she's walking through Wonderland, and she asks him which road she should take to get where she wants to go, and he says, "Well, that depends on where you want to go." And she says, "I don't care." And he says, "Well, in that case, it doesn't matter which road you take." Israel is there. We don't care, so it doesn't matter what we do. That needs to be addressed very quickly. If Israel needs to be stopped, all of its compounded crimes, all of its heartless, guileless taking of Arab lives and Palestinian lives, they're all, the rotten cherry on top, the rancid cherry on top of the rotten cake is this complete and utter disregard for anything and everything. That's probably the purest form of evil I can envision.
A very profound and unsettling place to end, I have to say, but always full of so much insight, nuance, very thought-provoking, and again, very educational. For everyone, again, watching, or if you're listening to the podcast, but if you're watching, please press like and subscribe. Leave your thoughts, leave your comments. Always, obviously, love to read your engagement. I do read through your comments, including the angry ones. Do keep the show on the road. Patreon.com/for listen to the podcast. But Ori Goldberg, as ever, such an honor. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure, Owen, and thank you for having me. It's an opportunity and a privilege.
Definitely for me as well. More than and always very appreciated by the audience. Thanks so much.